Warning: the following program contains politically incorrect opinions, free speech, and more caffeine than a CNN intern trying to stay awake through a Kamala Harris speech. Listener discretion is advised, especially if your pronouns are taxpayer and your safe space is funded by someone else's wallet.
Welcome back to Data and Dissonance, your drive time detox from the propaganda pipeline. It's Friday, the end of another week where America proved again that truth really is stranger and funnier than fiction. We've got a lineup today that mixes hard news with some moments so absurd they could have been written by The Onion. First, Trump is back at war with the Smithsonian because apparently a museum about America isn't American enough. And to spice it up, he's hinting at strolling through D.C. with the National Guard like it's Bring Your Troops to Work Day. Meanwhile, WWE just dropped WrestlePalooza to go head-to-head with AEW, and the streaming wars just got body slammed into prime time. Plus, don't worry, we've got our comedy bullets locked and loaded, because you can't get through Friday without laughing at the circus. Let's bring in the crew before we break this all down. First up, Brian, the man who wears a MAGA hat to church, the gym, and probably to bed. He's the guy who thinks Trump's Twitter comebacks should be taught in college debate class. And if patriotism were a sport, he'd have more rings than Tom Brady. Then there's Rachel, our resident independent. She's the one who can quote the Constitution and then roast both parties in the same breath, which means she irritates CNN and Fox equally. Think of her as the referee in this ideological steel cage match. Next is Daniel, our conspiracy theorist who insists every coincidence is really just a breadcrumb trail left by shadowy elites. If there's a triangle on a dollar bill, he'll give you a 10-minute TED Talk on why it proves the CIA runs your toaster. And finally, Skylar, our new voice of the Progressive Green Party, straight out of an eco-activist drum circle with a reusable coffee cup and enough idealism to power a wind farm. She's here to keep us grounded, remind us that plastic straws are evil and that capitalism is the villain of every story. So buckle up. This panel's ready to turn the news cycle into a demolition derby. Trump is back in the spotlight, stirring the pot on two fronts this week. First, calling out the Smithsonian for being too focused on slavery and anti-American ideology. And second, teasing that he'll personally patrol D.C. alongside the police and National Guard. Critics call it authoritarian cosplay, supporters say it's leadership, and the media, as always, is in full meltdown mode. Let's run this through the panel. Brian, you've been saying for years that Trump is the only president with the guts to call out institutions like the Smithsonian. Is this about history, or about Trump shaping the culture war on his own terms?
This is 100% about leadership in the culture war. Look, when you go to a taxpayer-funded museum, it shouldn't feel like a lecture on why America is the villain of history. That's exactly what the left wants, to guilt people into hating their own country. Trump standing up and saying, no, America isn't defined by its sins, it's defined by overcoming them. That's powerful. And it's not just symbolic, it's about reclaiming cultural ground that conservatives have surrendered for too long. The left screams censorship, but what Trump is doing is balance, reminding people that patriotism still belongs in the national story. And you better believe that resonates far beyond Washington.
All right, but let's talk about this patrol. Do you see this as just optics, or do you genuinely think Trump walking D.C. with the Guard makes a difference?
It absolutely makes a difference. Optics matter. People need to see their leaders side by side with the men and women who keep the streets safe. When Biden was in office, he hid in bunkers and lectured us on TV while crime surged. Trump? He throws on a jacket and walks shoulder to shoulder with the cops. That's law and order you can see and feel. Does it stop every criminal? No, but it shows America that the commander-in-chief isn't just talking. He's willing to be there in person. That's leadership. And the contrast with the left's weakness couldn't be sharper.
Rachel, Brian says this is about reclaiming cultural ground. But is Trump really defending history? Or is he just weaponizing museums for political points?
I think it's both, and that's the problem. Museums aren't perfect. They absolutely can lean too far into a single narrative. But Trump isn't a historian. He's a politician. and politicians always have an angle. When he criticizes the Smithsonian, it's not about accuracy, it's about rallying his base. Yes, history should include America's triumphs, but it also has to deal honestly with its failures. The danger here is turning history into a campaign ad. That cheapens the whole institution. And while Brian calls it balance, I call it using taxpayer-funded history as a political weapon, and that's a slippery slope.
Okay, so what about the DC patrol? Strong leadership or a stunt?
It's theater, pure and simple. And to be fair, Trump knows it's theater. He's a master at it. For his supporters, it's proof he's hands-on. But for the rest of us, it's a reminder that he thrives on spectacle. A president doesn't need to be a beat cop. He needs to govern, set policy, and manage crises. When Trump patrols DC, he's not making the streets safer. He's making headlines. And while that may excite his base, it leaves independents like me wondering whether the focus is on real solutions or just on the next viral photo op.
Daniel, you always say nothing Trump does is accidental. What's the bigger play here with the Smithsonian fight?
The Smithsonian fight is about controlling the narrative. Whoever controls history controls the future. Trump knows this. The left uses museums to frame America as irredeemably flawed, and if you let that worldview dominate, you end up with a generation conditioned to hate their own country. Trump's move isn't just about exhibits. It's about forcing the conversation into the open and exposing how the cultural gatekeepers manipulate history. This isn't random. It's targeted. He's peeling back the mask of who sets the narrative and making them show their hand.
And the patrol. Do you see it as more than just a photo op?
Absolutely. Everything Trump does has layers. On the surface, it looks like a PR stunt. But think about the message. He's telling bureaucrats, swamp creatures, and global elites that the president isn't hiding. He's on the ground, visible, with the people who enforce order. That's a signal, not just to Americans, but to the world. And of course, the media loses their minds, which is part of the plan, while they're screaming, "Dictator cosplay." He's sending signals to his base and his enemies about strength, courage, and control. Optics, sure, but optics with a deeper purpose.
Skylar, let's put it to you bluntly. Do you think Trump's criticism of the Smithsonian is legitimate? Or is it just an attack on telling the harder truths of America's past?
It's an attack. Plain and simple. Trump doesn't want history. He wants mythology. When you erase or minimize the ugly parts of America's past, you're not celebrating the country. You're lying about it. The Smithsonian isn't anti-American for teaching about slavery. It's doing its job. Education isn't supposed to make you comfortable. It's supposed to make you think. Trump calling that anti-American is just code for, I don't want you to learn anything that makes me or my followers uncomfortable. That's dangerous because it sets the stage for rewriting history to fit political goals.
And on the patrol, what do you make of Trump out there with the guard?
It's authoritarian theater, and people need to stop pretending it's anything else. Presidents don't patrol cities. They set national policy. Trump doesn't care about crime rates. He cares about the photo op. He wants to be seen as the strong man because it plays into his cult of personality. That's why his supporters cheer. It's not about safety, it's about identity. But authoritarian cosplay has consequences. It normalizes a vision of leadership that's about dominance, not democracy. And if people don't recognize that, they'll cheer right into a system that erodes the freedoms they claim to love.
So there you have it. Brian calls it leadership, Rachel calls it theater, Daniel calls it strategy, and Skylar calls it authoritarian cosplay. Whatever you call it, Trump once again has every newsroom, every panel, and every podcast. Yep, including this one, talking about him. That's the Trump effect. Coming up next, the squared circle is moving to your streaming service. WWE versus AEW, WrestlePalooza versus All Out. It's a steel cage match in the streaming wars, and we're breaking it down. All right, folks, let's step into the ring, literally. WWE just announced WrestlePalooza Live in Indianapolis on September 20th, streaming on ESPN's brand new platform. And here's the kicker. They scheduled it the exact same night as AEW's All Out. So now we've got not just a battle of wrestling brands, but a battle of streaming giants. ESPN versus everyone else. John Cena's being billed for what might be his last big indie match. Cody Rhodes is in the lineup, and the promotion machine is running at full throttle. The question is, does this turn into a ratings bloodbath? Or are we just watching billion-dollar companies body slam each other while fans pick sides? Brian, I know you're already hyped for this, so jump in. Brian, you're the MAGA hat and pro wrestling hat kind of guy. What does this mean for wrestling fans? Are we finally getting a true competition like back in the WCW versus WWF days?
Absolutely, and thank God for it. Wrestling has always been at its best when there's real competition. Back in the Monday Night Wars, fans got legendary matches because both sides had to push the envelope. WWE's gotten lazy at times. AEW's been scrappy but inconsistent, and now, boom, we've got a showdown. Cena and Indy, AEW firing back. It's a reminder that this isn't just entertainment. It's a cultural spectacle. Fans win when companies fight to outdo each other. This isn't some sleepy monopoly. It's survival of the flashiest, and I'm here for it.
Now, what about the ESPN factor? WWE leaving Peacock for ESPN streaming. Do you see this as a win for the fans, or just another corporate cash grab?
Look, everything in media is a cash grab, but this one actually benefits fans. ESPN has reach, it has brand power, and it gives wrestling mainstream legitimacy. When you're on Peacock, you're buried under reruns of The Office. On ESPN, you're front and center with sports heavyweights. That changes the game. And sure, people will complain about the subscription fees, but wrestling fans are loyal. They'll pay. What they get in return is bigger exposure, better production, and a seat at the table in the sports world. That's a win.
Rachel, competition is great, but does WWE going corporate with ESPN risk turning wrestling into just another sanitized product?
Honestly, yes. That's my concern. Wrestling's appeal has always been its grit, its unpredictability, its sense that you're watching something larger than life, but just a little out of control. When you put that under ESPN's microscope, you risk losing the edge. Everything becomes about sponsorships, polished branding, and staying advertiser-friendly. That's fine for football, but wrestling was never meant to be polished. It's supposed to be messy, theatrical, and ridiculous. If ESPN starts dictating terms, the danger is that WWE becomes too corporate, too safe, and fans start looking for the raw, authentic experience elsewhere. Maybe in AEW, maybe in smaller indie promotions. Competition's good, but over-sanitization could backfire.
And what about AEW? Do you think they can actually hold their ground against WWE in a head-to-head war?
They can, but only if they embrace being the underdog. AEW doesn't have the money WWE has, but they do have passion and a fan base that craves alternatives. If AEW tries to copy WWE, they'll lose. But if they lean into being unpredictable, edgy, and different, they'll hold ground. Think about how Netflix beat Blockbuster. It wasn't by being Blockbuster light, it was by changing the game. AEW has to give fans what they can't get from a polished ESPN machine. Raw, exciting, and maybe even controversial wrestling. If they do that, this won't be a slaughter. It'll be a war.
Daniel, you see conspiracies everywhere, so let me ask. Do you see this ESPN move as just about wrestling or something bigger?
It's bigger, way bigger. Wrestling's just the vehicle. This is about streaming wars and media consolidation. ESPN doesn't care about suplexes, they care about subscribers. WWE is a Trojan horse, a way to get passionate, loyal fans locked into a monthly subscription. And don't think it's just about sports, it's about data. ESPN wants to know who you are, what you watch, how you spend, and then funnel that into their larger ecosystem. Wrestling's the bait, but the real play is control of the streaming market. It's about eyeballs, algorithms, and ownership of culture. That's why this isn't just a wrestling story. It's a story about who gets to shape the future of entertainment itself.
Okay, but fans just want to watch matches. Do you think they even care about that corporate strategy?
Not directly, but they feel the effects whether they know it or not. Higher subscription costs, fewer options, more corporate oversight. Those all hit the fan experience. And when AEW is forced into battle, it's not just about wrestlers fighting, it's about media giants fighting for dominance. So yeah, fans might not care that they're pawns in the streaming war, but when your subscription price jumps or your favorite wrestler disappears because of network politics, suddenly the conspiracy isn't a theory anymore. It's reality.
Skylar, does this all just look like billion-dollar corporations fighting while fans get squeezed?
Exactly. At the end of the day, this isn't about fans, it's about profits. WWE didn't jump to ESPN because they care about viewers. They did it because ESPN offered them a bigger check. AEW isn't trying to fight for the soul of wrestling, they're fighting for market share. And who pays for it? Fans. Higher costs, more subscriptions, more fragmentation of content. We're watching corporate greed play out in spandex, and people are cheering because it's dressed up as entertainment. But underneath the fireworks, it's the same old story. Corporations cash in, consumers get squeezed.
So do you think AEW offers a real alternative? Or are they just another corporation waiting to sell out?
They're already halfway there. Sure, they market themselves as edgy and indie, but they're a corporation too. If ESPN or some bigger fish waved a check under their nose, they'd sell in a heartbeat. That's how this industry works. The only real alternative is grassroots. Local shows, fan-driven promotions, spaces where wrestling isn't just a product, it's a community. The big leagues will always end up chasing profits over passion, and as long as fans keep buying, corporations will keep cashing out. That's not cynicism. That's capitalism.
So Brian says this is the second coming of the Monday Night Wars. Rachel worries ESPN will sanitize the soul out of wrestling. Daniel sees a corporate Trojan horse. And Skylar says it's just billionaires brawling while fans foot the bill. What do I see? A pay-per-view of capitalism dressed in tights. Whoever wins, you better believe they're going to reach into your wallet for the rematch. Coming up, final thoughts to close out this Friday's episode. All right, quick pit stop before we roll into the Patriot Minute, because if you're listening to this show, chances are you've got a drink in your hand. And if you don't, you should. We just dropped 2 brand new 20-ounce stainless steel tumblers, and they're not just drinkware. They're statements. First up, the Christian Patriot Tumbler. Matte black, stainless steel, scripture, and steel all in one. It says, "Not ashamed of the cross or the Constitution." That's faith and freedom in one bold design. Take it to church, to work, or just sip it at home while scrolling through the news, knowing full well it'll trigger half the internet. It keeps your coffee hot, your water cold, and your values front and center. And then, for my Gen X crew, because we're the last generation that still remembers payphones and discipline, we've got the Fuck Your Feelings Gen X Skull Tumbler. Skull with shades, helmet slapped with Gen X across the top. It's rebellious, it's unapologetic, and it's the perfect way to let everyone at the office know you're done with their sensitivity seminars. Fill it with black coffee, bourbon, or Monster Energy. This thing doesn't care, and neither do you. Both tumblers are 20 ounces, vacuum-sealed stainless steel, built to last, and guaranteed to make your liberal coworkers spit out their oat milk latte. Get yours now at Data and Dissonance Store before they're gone. This week's Patriot Minute is dedicated to the folks who never make headlines but keep the heart of this country alive. Our veteran volunteers. I want to spotlight an organization called Team Rubicon. If you've never heard of them, they're a group of veterans, first responders, and civilians who deploy to disaster zones here at home and abroad. They've been on the front lines of hurricanes, wildfires, floods. you name it. While the government drags its feet and FEMA gets lost in its own paperwork, these men and women are already boots on the ground, chainsaws in hand, clearing debris, saving lives, and restoring hope. What makes Team Rubicon special is simple. They don't just talk about service, they live it. These are warriors who hung up the uniform but never quit the mission. They've taken the grit, discipline, and selflessness of military life and poured it into communities that need it most. And let's be honest, in a time when this country feels divided, these veterans remind us what unity actually looks like. Not a hashtag, not a soundbite. Just hard work, sacrifice, and compassion. So if you're listening right now and you've been wondering how to support something bigger than yourself, check them out. Donate, volunteer, spread the word. Because supporting groups like Team Rubicon isn't charity, it's patriotism. They embody what America's supposed to be: strong, resilient, and always ready to step up when times get tough. That's your Patriot Minute. God bless our veterans and God bless the United States of America. All right, time for Rachel's Red Pill Rant, the segment where our independent voice throws cold water on the mainstream narratives and drops some inconvenient truths.
Let's talk about inflation. The media will tell you it's cooling down, that prices are stabilizing, and that families are finally catching a break. But anyone who's bought groceries this week knows that's a lie. Eggs are still up, rent is through the roof, and utilities are draining bank accounts. What's really happening is politicians manipulate numbers to make themselves look good, while real people are being crushed. The red pill is this: both parties have failed on this issue. Republicans talk about cutting spending, Democrats talk about stimulus, and the American family is left eating ramen noodles while corporate profits soar. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, just not for you. That's the truth no one in Washington wants to admit.
Now let's hand the mic to Brian. Strap in, because this one's gonna come in hot.
You know what I'm sick of? The constant whining about Trump being too divisive. Divisive compared to what? The Democrats spent 4 years calling him a Russian agent, impeaching him twice, and burning down cities in the name of social justice. But suddenly, when Trump calls out a museum or walks D.C. with the guard, that's dangerous authoritarianism? Give me a break. The truth is, Trump scares them because he actually connects with people. He actually listens to cops, truckers, farmers, and veterans. Meanwhile, the left listens to TikTok influencers and academic crybabies. My rant is simple. If defending America, its history, and its people makes you divisive, then so be it. Sign me up for more division, because unity under weakness is just surrender.
All right, Daniel, clear off your corkboard and string up the red yarn. It's time for the conspiracy board.
Everyone's talking about Trump versus museums and wrestling shows, but here's what you need to notice. Timing. Every time the establishment gets nervous, whether it's about the border, the economy, or foreign policy, suddenly the media finds a shiny distraction. Think it's a coincidence that the Smithsonian dust-up hit right as new documents were released about foreign lobbying in D.C., or that WrestlePalooza got hyped the same week streaming giants faced antitrust questions. Number distraction is the oldest play in the book. You think you're choosing between Trump or Biden, Pepsi or Coke, WWE or AEW, but really, the same corporate puppeteers are pulling all the strings. The conspiracy board isn't about paranoia, it's about patterns. And once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them.
And finally, let's give Skylar the mic for the progressive perspective. This is Skylar's Soapbox.
You want to know what the real problem is? Corporate power. Whether it's Trump flexing on the Smithsonian, WWE cashing ESPN checks, or politicians pretending to fight inflation while pocketing donor money, it all comes back to billion-dollar interests controlling the system. And every time we get distracted by culture wars, they win. Because while we argue over what's on a museum wall, Oil companies are posting record profits and climate change is accelerating. While we debate wrestling shows, healthcare costs skyrocket and people go bankrupt over insulin. I know it's not popular to say, but the system isn't red versus blue. It's top versus bottom. And until people wake up and see that, the rest of us will keep getting squeezed. That's the truth from this soapbox.
All right. We've covered Trump versus the Smithsonian, a presidential patrol of DC, WrestlePalooza versus AEW, and we've had our specialty segments. Now let's land this plane with some final thoughts from the crew before I close us out.
Here's my final thought. This week proved that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Trump is out there fighting the culture war head-on, whether it's museums rewriting history or walking the streets of DC with the Guard. Meanwhile, Democrats are too busy worrying about pronouns and climate conferences. And yeah, people will call it theater. But I'd rather have a president who puts on a show of strength than one who hides in a basement or bows to global elites. At the end of the day, this is about standing tall for America unapologetically. And that's exactly what Trump does.
My final thought is this. Theater cuts both ways. Trump thrives on spectacle, and his supporters see strength where others see performance. The danger is that when everything becomes a show, policy takes a back seat. Yes, competition in wrestling is fun, and debates over museums are important, but we can't let ourselves be distracted from the real challenges: debt, healthcare, foreign policy. If politics becomes pure entertainment, then we've all lost, because government is supposed to serve people, not ratings. My hope is that people start demanding substance, not just spectacle.
Final thought from me. Watch the timing. Every distraction serves a purpose. Trump fighting with museums, WWE streaming wars. It's all noise layered over something deeper. Ask yourself, what bills got passed quietly this week? What foreign deals slipped under the radar while the media was obsessing over optics? That's where the real game is played. The ruling class counts on us getting distracted by the headlines. But if you follow the money, the documents, the quiet moves, that's where the truth is. My conspiracy board is never empty because the patterns never stop.
My final thought is that this whole week was another example of corporate control running wild. Whether it's ESPN buying into wrestling, politicians playing with taxpayer-funded museums, or culture wars meant to divide us, it all benefits the powerful. Regular people are paying more at the store, worrying about bills, and seeing their futures squeezed while billionaires laugh from their yachts. We need to stop falling for the show and start focusing on who's pulling the strings. Because if we don't, nothing changes. And I refuse to accept that nothing is all we get.
And here's where I land on it. This week felt like America in a nutshell. Loud, messy, dramatic, and at times, hilarious. We watched a president trigger the media into convulsions over museums. We saw the streaming wars literally climb into a wrestling ring, and we listened to every side of the spectrum argue about what it all means. But here's the truth. Beneath the noise, there's a battle for the soul of this country. Do we honor our history or rewrite it? Do we fight for real competition or surrender to corporate monopolies? Do we demand leadership or settle for theater? What I know is this: our listeners aren't here for safe takes. You're here because you're awake enough to know the system is broken and bold enough to laugh at the madness while still fighting to fix it. That's the Data and Dissonance way. And as always, remember to speak truth, stir thought.